Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at installing the Airlift WirelessONE Easy Mount Air Compressor on a 2023 Toyota Tundra. Adding airbags to any vehicle that's going to be towing a decent amount of weight is always a good option. It gives you the adjustability to reduce the sag and really get a lot of benefits when it comes to steering and braking and just prolonging the life of your suspension. But the one downside that I've really found with airbags is without a compressor, you're going to have to stop at a gas station or have your own compressor at home to be able to fill that up. And if you want to change pressure, you are having to go to the back of your truck to that manual inflation valve. Well, adding a compressor can fix that problem. And this one from Airlift is a great option because not only do you get a controller that lives inside the truck, you can also use your phone to control this via Bluetooth. And also what's really nice is a lot of other compressor systems, you have to run into the cab with actual air lines. That's not the case here. This is super easy. There's just a harness that you're going to run up to the battery, a few small connections, running an air filter, and then tying into your bags. Other than that, that's pretty well it. So if you did the airbags yourself, this is going to be super easy. This is not too much harder than doing the airbags. And really overall, this system's awesome for a few different reasons. Not only can you control it with your controller, but also it's going to maintain 5 PSI. That's the minimum that you can set to it, which is the minimum that you're supposed to keep in your bags. So you don't ever have to worry about always checking to make sure that 5 PSI is in the bag. You can tell right away from the digital readout. Now, things that I will point out with this system is originally we had a dual path system on our airbags, meaning individual control of each bag. This is going to be set up more for a single path because there's only one output for the air. It's going to have to tee into both the bags and keep those nice and even, which if you do want a dual path system or to maintain that, to have separate pressures in each bag, you can pick up a different compressor that's going to allow you to do that. But this one is pretty simple, and that's the glory of it. There's not a whole lot that you really have to do, and once it's installed, it's super usable and reliable. Now this is also set up to only go up to 100 PSI, which that's what our bags are rated for. If you have some extremely heavy duty bags, some of them go to 150, and that's a time that you're probably going to want to look at a larger compressor system. Now as far as sound goes, you can hear it running, and that's just going to adjust the pressure until it's happy, and once it reaches that limit, it'll shut off. And then if you need to air out the bags, it does it pretty quickly. So we'll bump this down about 20 PSI and let it go. Now as far as the installation goes, this one's pretty easy. If you already did your airbags like I mentioned before, this shouldn't take you too long. And on this truck, it's actually really accessible. I found a great spot to mount up, and also running all the wires was super easy, a lot easier than some of the other trucks I've done. So definitely a good option, and let's follow along. We'll make sure you get your compressor installed on your Tundra. Now we're going to get ready to get our compressor installed, and if you already did the airbags on your vehicle, more than likely this is going to be just as easy. There's a little bit of electrical involved, but overall this kit makes it super easy to get your compressor in line with your bags. So obviously make sure you have your bags installed already, and then it comes down to just mounting up everything. So as far as mounting up our compressor, there's 2 different ways that we can do this on our truck. And the first one is going to be this U-bolt that's going to go around the frame of the truck. And there's only 2 ways that you can't mount this. So it's pretty nice to be able to rotate this around as necessary. But the 2 ways that you want to avoid are going to be this electrical connector. We don't want that facing down, nor do we want the Airlift logo facing down. So other than that, it leaves us with a decent configurations to be able to get this set up. I think what I'm going to do is actually run it this way. We'll find that there's a bracket here, and this little notch on the frame of our air compressor seems like this is going to be a perfect spot. So that's not going to allow us to use the clamp that goes around the frame, but it's open here to where we can drill these out and use the self-tapping screws included in the kit to get this mounted up. I like that it's going to be right above the frame rail, so we won't really have to worry about any clearance issues. Everything's pretty easily accessible as far as getting the rest of it all hooked up. So I'll go ahead, I'm going to hold this in place, get it as level as I can, and then I'll just mark out the spots that I'm going to be drilling out. And with those marked out, I'm just using a 1/4 inch drill bit. I'll go ahead and drill out the holes in the frame. Now the way I'm going to lay mine out, I have the plug facing towards the front, and eventually our harness is going to run to the battery. We also have these 2 wires. Our air fitting is going to be up top, and then this is where we're going to run our air filter up. So I really like this configuration. It just kind of makes sense as far as getting it all laid out. So we'll grab the 2 self-tapping screws included in the kit, and this is what we're going to put in place to get this mounted up. It's just going to be a 1/2 inch socket to get this accomplished. So I'll kind of hold that in place here and then zip this down. And I'll get my other one in place before tightening it down. And with self-tapping screws, don't use an impact. You're probably best to just use a ratchet and a socket and just slowly tighten this down. And once it bottoms out and it's nice and solid, there's no need to go anymore. You don't want to damage the threads that you just created. Now with that nice and solidly mounted, we'll grab our harness and we're just going to plug this in. Eventually this is going to run up to our battery, but there are going to be 2 small connections off of our compressor that we're going to want to take care of. So first thing, we'll get this plugged in. And you'll see this locking tab, so when you slide it in and it clicks, just push that red tab up and that should lock that in place. Now when we run up to the battery, we're just going to go along the frame rail and up into the engine bay, just avoiding any suspension, exhaust, anything that could obviously damage the wires. And we're going to have 3 wires. We have a red, that's going to be our power. Our pink is going to be if you want to run this to an ignition switch from a fuse. That way the compressor only kicks on when you have the key in the ignition. A lot of times it's kind of up to you. I think we're just going to omit this, and then we have a negative. Now as we go down the wire harness, you see they taped it up, made it nice and easy for us. There's also this red and white wire, and that will attach to the red wire off of our compressor. There's also a ground off the compressor. So what I'm going to do is get this ran. We should have extra wire, and making our connection with the red wire is going to be easy, but the black wire, you can self-tap this into the frame, but if we go up maybe 2 foot, there's a factory ground that's located right here. So if I can extend those wires and utilize the factory ground, it'll make it a little bit easier for all of us, but we will need to run this to get that extra wire. So I'll get this ran up to my battery and then I'll show you exactly how it looks. To run our electrical harness up is actually pretty easy. I just kind of zip tied it up. There's this bracket right here and just ran it along the frame rail. And once you kind of get to this body mount, you kind of tuck it in on the inside, and then to route up, you can actually see here on the side, I was able to get those wires passed up, and then it makes it pretty easy to pull it up. If you need to, you can use a pull wire, just kind of feed it down, tape up the wires and pull it up. But now we just have our wires ready to go in the engine bay, so we'll lower this down, and I'll show you how to make those connections. I ended up pulling our wires right in front of the battery, and we obviously have quite a bit of extra here, so I'm just going to cut off right here. And it's okay to have a little bit of extra. In fact, it's not a bad thing. If you ever have to make any changes to the electrical, you can always loop a little extra here. And I did mention that I'm going to use a little bit of that black wire that I cut off for our ground, so you can keep that handy for later. And what we're going to do is first, I talked about our pink wire. That's going to wire up to the ignition or a fuse panel that only kicks on when you're going to have the key in ignition. So you can use a test light to determine that fuse, but we're going to omit that today. So for now, I'll just take my pink wire and I'm going to just tape this up. And that just leaves us with the red and black. And you could probably assume that they're going to go to positive and negative, which is correct. But before we do that, we're going to want to put our fuse holder in place. So what I like to do is actually get the fuse holder mounted up where I want it. I might use this brace to kind of keep it in a good spot here. So what I'll do is cut back on this loop, and then I'll strip back one of the ends here. And included in the kit is going to be our ring terminal. So grab that and we'll crimp that down. And with that crimped down, We'll make sure that we don't have the fuse in the fuse holder. We don't want power going through here as we're making electrical connections. And as I mentioned, I'm going to run mine here. So to get the terminal nut off, it's going to be a 12mm socket. So I'll take that off. And I'll also loosen up the negative here while we're there. That's also a 12mm. And then I can strip back this end, and this will attach to our red wire. Now included in the kit is going to be these yellow butt connectors. These are heat shrink butt connectors. So once you crimp it down, you're going to want to take a heat gun, and what that's going to do is start to cinch the ends around. And since this is in the engine bay, has the potential for anything that you're driving in to get this wet. And we want to make sure that long term that our connections are going to stay strong. So heating this up is going to seal that up and prevent any corrosion from occurring. So I'll strip back a portion of our red wire and get this crimped into our butt connector. And our black wire, I'll just strip this back. We'll put a ring terminal on it, and that's going to go to the negative. This is a thinner gauge wire than our red wire, so I recommend, just because that ring terminal is it's a yellow one, which is generally a larger gauge, to give it a little bit more bite, just strip it back a little more, and then you can bend it back, and that's going to give it a little bit better contact when crimping down. So we'll get this onto our negative. And we're still going to hold off on putting our fuse in until we get everything hooked up. We don't want that compressor kicking on until we have everything set up. Make sure these are tightened down, and then I'll grab my heat gun and shrink down our butt connector. Now just to clean up the wires here, I'm going to grab some wire loom, but just zip tie it up to where it's not going to be loose and it's going to be nice and clean in the engine bay. Now back at our compressor, we're going to go ahead and extend our black wire and then attach our red wire to the red and white wire that was from the harness. This is also a time that you're going to want to probably use that heat shrink butt connector because, again, it has the potential to be exposed to elements. So I'll get these stripped back, get these all attached, and then with my ring terminal I mentioned before, there's a factory ground that's up here on the frame that I'm going to use. If you don't have extra butt connectors or don't want to extend the wire, not to worry, you can just self-tap that into the frame and it's going to work the same. Now we need to get our air filter mounted up, and that's eventually going to go into the barbed fitting off the compressor. So the air filter, you'll find the barbed fitting with your kit. You can tighten this down. You don't need to put any thread tape or anything like that on it. And in the kit is going to be a smaller spool of a little bit more flexible wire than the traditional airline for the airbags. And what we're going to do is get this attached on the barbed fitting. And this air filter needs to go to a place where you can obviously draw clean, fresh air. So a lot of times what we'll do is kind of tucked up here in the back side of the bed. It's pretty wide open, and a lot of times things don't really go up there as far as getting it too dirty. So it's a good spot for the air filter to go. So I'll get this attached on both ends, and I'm not going to cut any extra off. A lot of times if I do have excess, I'll just loop it, and that way if it does pull moisture, a lot of times that'll pool at the bottom rather than going into our compressor. So I'll get this all mounted up and show you how it looks. Now I got this routed up. I just kind of went over our body mount on the frame and kind of tucked that behind here. And then as it loops up, you're going to find that there is a hole that's already there from the factory. And the air filter has just kind of a snap pin that goes in place. So I just looped up the excess air line, and I also ran a zip tie through here. That way, if this clip was to get loose, that zip tie is going to hold it all up in place. So now that we have that in place, all that's left to do is tie into our airbags. Now our air fitting is going to be located up top here, and it's just going to be a push connect fitting. So if you did your airbags yourself, This shouldn't be too hard to do. We're just going to tap into that push connect fitting and route it back to our bags. And with the T-unions, that's where we're going to split it up. This is going to be a single path system, so the air pressure is going to go evenly distributed between both bags, but we also need to maintain a manual fill valve. That way if the compressor stops working for whatever reason, we can still put air in the bag. So I'll get this all routed up and then show you how mine kind of lays out on this truck. Now to get this routed back, pretty easy. I just went straight up from our fitting on the inside of our frame rail or body mount here, just the same as I did the air filter. And then you're going to see this large body harness that kind of, we got this module here. And I just use that to run it back. That's generally a safe path. Just zip tie that up. And then I made my way back to our bags, and I'll show you how I connected that. I continued running this down, following again some of the just wire loom that we have. And then I made my way up to the channeling on our bed. And this is where I use loom clamps to kind of attach everything and make sure that it's not flopping around. You can just use zip ties, but our supply line is going into our T, and then this line just runs over and into our bag, and then this portion runs across this bed channeling to our other T. And this, you'll see pretty quickly, this down one goes over to our bag, and as this feeds in, this portion is going to go down and eventually to our driver's side bag, and then our line over here I just ran along our frame rail, and this becomes our manual fill, which I just put on a little bracket that I made. So just like you did your airbags, the thing that you're going to want to do is test to make sure that it's all working and that there's no leaks, but we're going to use our compressor to do that. So we'll go ahead, grab the fuse near our fuse holder and put that in place to give us power. Now when we put our fuse in place, you're also going to want your controller, and we're going to pull the tab out, because as we put the fuse in, that's going to give it power and it's going to want to start pairing together. Now if you don't have your controller handy and you've already powered it up, you're going to want to pull that fuse out, and that'll restart the pairing process, but it's important that we get these paired together now. So with that in place, we'll just push the button on our controller, and it's going to be scanning for devices. Now, ours came up with 179301, and that's going to be the number on ours, and immediately we can hear that compressor kick on. So I'll select that. It's going to do a pairing screen, so we'll give that a little second here. And sometimes on the first go around, I found that the pairing will be unsuccessful. If that's the case, just pull the fuse and then try again, and 9 times out of 10, it's going to work. So it's still going to do the pairing here. Now I went ahead, I pulled the fuse and then paired it again. It said pairing failed. I just clicked the button one more time and it was successful. So just make sure that that pairing is successful, and it should come up with 5, which is the minimum PSI that's required in the bags, which is really nice because no matter what, you're always going to maintain that little bit of pressure. Now, when it comes to dialing in the pressure, it's super easy to use here. There's going to be 3 different presets, so you can have 1, 2, or if you hold both of them, 3, so that way if you have 3 different trailers, you can preset those to the pressure you want. But other than that, you just push the up for more pressure and down to release pressure. So I do want to test to make sure that we don't have any leaks. So I'm going to put it up to 30 PSI. You'll see the arrow here. It's going to be raising up until it reaches that 30 PSI. So if you install your airbags, you probably remember checking for any leaks using a soapy water solution. It's going to be the exact same that we're doing here. We've just added quite a few more push connect fittings, so it's imperative that you spray all of them down. The good thing is if you do have a small leak, you're going to start to see the pressure drop off, and the compressor is going to be kicking on to maintain that. So if your compressor just kind of randomly runs for a little bit and it tops it off after a small drop, it's a good chance you have a small leak, and you're going to want to attack that. Something else that I'll recommend doing is also downloading the app. This is super convenient. It's really nice. You can mount it wherever, up on your visor or in the center console, but to have it on your phone is also nice to have. In case the batteries, go dead on this, or the kids might have gotten a hold of your controller, you can still control it from your phone. And once you've checked to make sure there's no leaks, you're ready to go out and start adjusting the pressure on the fly on your new compressor system. And that was a look at installation of the Airlift WirelessONE Easy Mount Air Compressor on a 2023 Toyota Tundra.